Flux Manage is a new graphical media management system which replaces the Flux and Sequence browser tools found in earlier versions of Baselight. Flux Manage is available in all Baselight systems running version 5 software and provides powerful searching, sorting, filtering and copying capabilities to help you quickly find the material you need. In this tutorial, I will take you through the processes of browsing and searching for material and then filtering your search results to select only the material you need. I'll explain how to build complex metadata queries using the powerful graphical interface and show you all the options available for inserting, copying, moving and deleting footage. I'll also take a look at combining search results and selecting material from scenes and jobs, as well as from locations on disk. To access Flux Manage, you press F while holding down the Windows key on the keyboard, or the Control key if you're on a Mac. Or you can select Flux Manage from the Views menu. Flux Manage will also open automatically whenever a source sequence is required to be inserted into the stack. For example, when setting an inside-outside layer to work as a compositing layer. The Flux Manage view is split into different panels, each of which can be resized by clicking and dragging on the splitter bars. The top panel contains either a browser or a filter view. I'll explain more about that in a minute. At the moment, I have a browser tab selected, labelled Browser 1. The browser area in Flux Manage functions in the same way as other file browser windows in Baselight. You first select the volume you want to browse by clicking on the Volumes button. This is a list of volumes which can be accessed by this Baselight system. The first two are other Baselight systems connected via the Baselight cloud network. Then there's the local disk on this machine, and then below that are a couple of removable drives I have plugged into this system. Once you've selected the volume, you can then navigate along a folder path by clicking on successive folders. The current path is shown in the drop-down path button at the top. Clicking on this allows you to quickly jump back to a previous level in the path. You can also add a bookmark at any point in the path to enable you to quickly find that location again in the future. When you select a folder containing media files, these will be shown in the lower part of the Flux Manage view. If there are media files in folders further down the directory structure, you can continue to select the lower folders. If you want to see all the media files below a certain level in the path, for example, I want to find everything below the VFX folder here, you can enable this Descend button. This is now showing all the media files contained within this folder and its subfolders. A summary is provided on this blue tile at the top of the Files panel. The area to the right of the Browser and Files panels contains an information viewer. If I click on one of the thumbnails to select it, you can see all the available metadata for that media file. Note that we use the term sequences to refer to all types of media file, as they are considered a sequence of frames, even if they are contained inside a movie file. A still image is a sequence of just one frame, for example. Selected metadata for each of these media files can also be shown below the thumbnails. You can choose the data you want to see by clicking on the Metadata Selector button and choosing the items here. If you want to change the size of the thumbnails, you drag on a thumbnail using the middle mouse button while holding down the Control key, or the Command key on a Mac. If you're using a tablet, then you click and hold the lower side button while dragging the pen across the tablet. This is the same as zooming in other places in Baselight. As you change the size of the thumbnails, they'll automatically rearrange to fill the panel. An alternative to the thumbnail or grid view is the list view. This displays each sequence on a separate row, with columns for the different metadata fields contained in each sequence. You can select which columns you want to see using the drop-down selector at the side, similar to the thumbnail view, but you can choose more metadata types here. You can reorder the columns by dragging their headings sideways across the list view. This is similar to the way you display and rearrange the metadata columns in the Shots view. The list of sequences can also be sorted by clicking on the column headings. If you click a second time, it reverses the sort direction. The little white arrow next to the column heading indicates the sort direction. I'll now switch back to the grid view, and you'll notice that the sort order of the thumbnails is retained from the list view. Multiple thumbnails can be selected by keeping the Control key, or the Command key on a Mac, held down while you click on them. To quickly select a range of thumbnails, you can first select the first thumbnail and then shift-click on the end of the range. You can also remove sequences from the selection by Control or Command clicking on them again. You can select all the sequences by holding down Control or Command on a Mac and pressing A on the keyboard, and you can deselect everything using Shift, Control or Command and A. Another way to select and deselect all the sequences is to right-click and then choose the appropriate item from the pop-up menu. All the selected sequences are shown with a yellow outline, and a summary of the number of sequences and non-media files and the total file size is shown in a blue tile at the top of the information area. The metadata shown here relates to the last thumbnail you clicked on, which is indicated with yellow corners rather than a complete yellow outline. If you want to preview a media file, move the mouse pointer near to the top edge of its thumbnail and you will see a yellow scrub bar appear. While this bar is visible, left-click and drag to the left or right to scrub through the frames in the sequence. The thumbnail will update as you do this, and the main grading display will also temporarily switch over to show the sequence you're scrubbing. For this tutorial, I'm working on a machine which just has a single monitor and no SDI output, so the grading display appears as a view within the desktop. If I drag the edge of the Flux Manage window over, you can see the grading display showing the sequence as I drag through it. Notice that it says Flux Manage below the display, so you know you're looking at the preview image rather than your normal cursor. You can lock the grading display into Flux Manage preview mode, so it doesn't switch back to the cursor display when you stop scrubbing. You do that by enabling the preview button. In preview mode, you can use the left and right arrow keys on the keyboard to step through the sequence frame by frame. You can also play through the selected sequence by clicking on the Flux Manage play button. Notice that if I have more than one sequence selected, it plays through all of them in the order they appear here. This can be a very useful way to preview a selection of shots without having to add them to the timeline in your scene. It's worth pointing out that Flux Manage plays the image sequences directly from disk without using any sort of cache, so larger frame sizes or certain types of media may not play back in real time on some machines. If the sequence has multiple tracks or channels, such as a multi-layer EXR file, Flux Manage allows you to view those too. For example, this VFX shot is a multi-layer EXR file containing 20 channels. I can preview the different layers in the file by selecting them from the Channel Track button here. This button only appears when a multi-channel file is selected. Now, before I continue, I'm going to switch over to a different workspace. This workspace includes the Flux Manage view docked within the UI workspace, rather than as a floating window, so I can more easily see the image display and timeline without them being hidden behind the Flux Manage window. I'll also select a different folder to browse. This folder contains source footage from an episode of a TV series. I've enabled the Descend button, so Flux Manage is showing us all the files contained within this folder and its subfolders. In the summary tile here, Flux Manage is telling us that we have 137 sequences in total. It also says there are 3 non-media files, And if I scroll down to the end of the thumbnails, you'll see a thumbnail which says 3 non-media files. If I click on the Show Files button, it will list these files. In this case, you can see they're EDL files. You can also view the non-media files by clicking on this button here. Now, if I want to find just the shots from a specific reel, for example, I can apply a filter to all these sequences. One way to do this is to click on this F button above the thumbnails. You'll find this button in many places in Baselight. It allows you to enter a text string to match what you're looking for. In this case, we can enter some text to match the file name of the files we want. So for example, if I type in A001, it will select only those sequences which contain A001 in their file name. For this project, that'll be all the shots which were recorded on Reel 1. As soon as I applied the filter, you'll notice that I now have a new tab in the upper half of the Flux Manage view. This is a filter page. It contains a set of filtered tiles which produce a filtered list of sequences. In this case, you can see that we have a total of 137 sequences being filtered to give us just 4 sequences whose file names contain A001. You can edit the filtering criteria by double-clicking on a filter tile. At the moment, it's matching any file name which contains the text A001. But I could change that, for example, to find file names which start with just A00. Now we have all the shots from reels A001 to A009. Depending on the type of metadata field, you can use different matching criteria. One very powerful method is to use regular expressions. I haven't got time to go into these right now, but you may have come across them in applications such as OpenOffice, where they can be used to create templates to match complex strings of characters. Full information will be available in the Baselight reference guide. Now, filtering on the file name may be useful, but you generally want to select files using other metadata, such as clip name, reel number, camera ID, and so on. Well, this is very easy to set up using Flux Manage. I'll remove the current filter tile by right-clicking on it and selecting Remove from the menu. Now we have all 137 sequences again. This time, I want to find all the shots from camera B. Rather than use the file name filter, I'm going to drag a tile from the tile library. As I drag the filter tile onto the filter area, I get a message pop up saying, drag onto an existing tile to build the filter. If I drag it over the browser results tile, I have the option to use it to sort or to filter the results. In this case, I want to filter them, so I'll drop it in this area. I now have to select the parameters for the clip filter, so I'll select starts with and type B. Okay, so these 28 sequences are all the camera B shots. I can combine filter criteria by adding more tiles from the library. For example, I may want to find the shots from camera B which are less than 100 megabytes in size. So I'll drag the size tile from the library and drop it over the AND area. If I now enter size less than 100 megabytes, we now have 17 sequences. I'll now rename the filter page to remind me what it does. You just double-click on the tab to type in a new name. I'm going to add these shots to my timeline. However, before I do that, I can sort them into a specific order. In this case, I want them in timecode order. Again, I can use a tile from the library to sort them. Now they are sorted into increasing timecode. But if for some reason I want them in decreasing timecode order, I can right-click on the tile and select Reverse. You can also add a sort tile using the keyboard shortcut S. I'll just remove the existing sort by right-clicking on it so I can show you that. When I press S on the keyboard, a box pops up asking me to type in the type of sort I want to use. I'll start to type the word timecode, and as soon as I've typed the first few letters, it offers me timecode as an option. All I have to do is press enter and the tile is added. This can be a real time saver if you use the keyboard a lot. Incidentally, pressing F on the keyboard will add a filter tile. You can type in the first few letters of the metadata you want to filter on, and it'll then show you a list of the available metadata keys. Check the user reference manual for details of all the keyboard shortcuts. Now you may have noticed that these thumbnails all look a little bit washed out. That's because they're being displayed in their native color space rather than having a color space conversion applied. Baselight uses the information contained in the metadata to determine the correct color space. However, these particular files do not contain the correct color space flag, so I'll have to manually set them to the correct color space. In this case it's ARRI log C, and I can select that by clicking on this color space button here. Okay, that's better. They all look correct now. Now, if I want to add all these sequences to the timeline, I can just simply double-click on the summary tile. They are added in the order specified in the filter. Okay, I'll just undo that so I can show you other ways to add sequences to the timeline. If you just want to add a single shot, you can double-click on its thumbnail. But notice when I do that the cursor stays put, so if I then want to add another shot after this one, I need to move the cursor first. You can also add one or more shots by selecting their thumbnails and then clicking on the Insert Sequences at Cursor button. When you insert multiple sequences, the cursor moves to the end of the last sequence. Again, they're added in the order they appear in the results list, which is the order specified by the sort tile in the filter page. You can also select just a frame range within a sequence before inserting it into the timeline, using the Mark In and Mark Out buttons above the Preview button. You can also use the left and right square brackets to set the in and out marks. One thing you should check before adding shots to the timeline is that their format and frame rate are set correctly. If you choose a frame rate which is different from the scene's working frame rate, a warning box will pop up asking whether you want to change the frame rate to match the scene or insert them at the different frame rate. If you choose a different frame rate to the working frame rate, Baselight will time stretch or time compress the sequence. Okay, I'll now show you how to make a new filter to select a different set of sequences to add to the scene. First, I'll create a new filter page by clicking on the plus button at the top right-hand corner of the filter area. Initially, there's nothing in the filter and no results. Now I'm going to add all the source material I want to filter to this page. I'll use the set of sequences I have in the Browser 1 page. I can do this by dragging the summary tile from that page into the new filter page, and then dropping it at the top of the page. Now I have the same 137 unfiltered sequences which I started with before. This time I want to select sequences which were recorded on reels 127 and 128. These have clip IDs which start with A127 and A128. So I'll drag the clip tile from the library and set the value to starts with A127. I'll now combine this with another clip tile set to A128. Now I incorrectly combined these with an AND function, and obviously it's not finding anything because none of the clips have two real numbers. I should have used an OR. So I can rearrange the filter by simply dragging and dropping the tiles into a different place. Note that you can also undo and redo changes you make to the filter using these buttons up here. So I now have a total of 7 sequences from this filter. I'll rename the filter page, reels 127 and 128, And again, I'll sort them into timecode order using the timecode tile from the library. So far, I've been using sequences which are all contained within the same source folder. However, what if the footage I need to search through is contained in several different folders, or even on different volumes? Well, Flux Manage provides an easy way to combine multiple sources into a single media pool. I'll start by adding a new browser page this time. I do that by clicking on the little folder icon up here. I'll now select the same folder I did before, containing footage for this TV episode, but I also want to add footage from a second folder. I do that by clicking on the pin button on the summary tile. Now I have a new tile which says select another folder or volume. I'll select the additional folder containing the rest of the footage for this TV show. This folder contains 123 sequences, giving me a total of 260 sequences. I'll rename this browser page by double-clicking on its tab, and I can now filter this combined pool of source media by dragging the overall summary tile onto the View or Filter area at the bottom of the screen. Once again, Flux Manage has created a new filter page. This is another way of starting a filter in Flux Manage. This time, rather than use a tile from the Filter Tile library, I want to filter using metadata from the source sequences themselves. I can view some of the metadata fields if I switch over to the list view, but this only provides me with a selection of the metadata available. If I want to access all the metadata available in all these sequences, I can enable the Metadata Pivot button. You can also enable this by pressing P on the keyboard. This gives us a list of all the different metadata keys found in all these files, although not all the keys will be in each file. The number of unique values for each metadata key is also shown here. For example, across all these sequences, we can see that there are 260 unique clip names. Well, that makes sense, as there are 260 sequences in this pool. I can now use this metadata to create a filter using a whole range of different criteria. For example, if I want to find all the master shots which were recorded as ProRes 4444, I can select the Encoding Metadata key. Rather than scroll down the list of all these different metadata keys to find it, I'll use this filter button to narrow it down. If I type in the word encoding, it shows me the matching keys available. This is the one I want, showing me that there are 3 different types of encoding used in all these sequences. If I click on it, we can now see that there are 112 ProRes 4444 files. If I now click on the ProRes 4444 value, the relevant sequences are selected in the sequence list. I could now insert these selected sequences into my scene, but in this case I want to use this metadata value to make a filter. I do that by double-clicking on it. Now we have a filter which is selecting all the ProRes 4444 files from our combined media pool. I can now refine my filter using additional metadata values. For example, if I just want to find the camera A shots, I can select the camera metadata key. I'll drag the value camera A into the filter page I just created, and then drop it into the AND area to combine it with the existing filter. So now we have a list of all the ProRes 4444 clips from camera A. We can also filter using metadata values from an individual sequence. For example, this shot is from reel 48, and if I want to find the other shots from reel 48, I can drag this value over the filter. As you can see, there are multiple ways to combine filter criteria by dragging and dropping from different places in Flux Manage. Once you've created a filter, you may want to apply it to different selections of source material. For example, you may set up a filter to select specific shots from a directory, and then want to apply that filter to an additional directory to find extra shots you may have missed. In the example I showed you earlier, we found 7 shots on reels 127 and 128. But we were only looking in the Lurchenberg 1 folder. I now have a combined pool of all the source material for this TV show, and I'd like to apply the filter to this to make sure we've got all the shots. To do that, I simply drag the summary tile over the original filter tab. As soon as I drag it over the tab, the page opens, and I can now drop it into the filter. I have the option to replace, plus, or accept. In this case, I'll drop it into the replace area, because I want to replace the original source media pool. But the other options are useful when combining additional sources. Now we have 9 sequences. 2 additional sequences are found in the new folder. Hopefully by now you're getting some idea of the power of Flux Manage. You can very quickly select one or more folders containing media you want to search through, and then easily build and apply a complex filter by dragging and dropping tiles from the filter tile library, by using metadata values from the results list via the Metadata Pivot function, or from an individual sequence using metadata from the information area. Okay, now I've got these sequences selected, I could add them to my timeline, but instead I'm going to use Flux Manage to copy them to another location. In order to do this, I'll switch the Flux Manage view into 2-panel mode. The right-hand side has the same functionality as the left-hand side. This allows me to select a different volume and browse to a new folder on the right. I want to create a new folder in here, so I'll click on the Create Folder button. And then to copy the files, I simply drag the summary tile over to the new folder. Now, rather than simply copying the selected sequences into the new folder, I have the option to retain some or all of the original path structure for each sequence. This dialog box allows me to choose the number of folders from the original path or paths I want to retain. In this case, I want to copy all the files into a single folder and flatten the original directory structure down. So I'll type 7 into the trim field to remove the original directories. The options in the lower part of the window allow me to set up the type of copy operation. For example, sync mode will only copy across files which have changed, or new ones. These options are explained fully in the Baselight reference guide. I can also choose to retain the original file ownership, permissions, and timestamps, and add resolution directories if necessary. And once I've chosen the options, I can save them as my defaults for next time. Right, now I'll click on OK to start the copy. In the operation history section down here, you can see that a new operation is now in progress. The copying is happening in the background under the control of the Queue Manager. I can open up the Queue Monitor view by clicking on this button. This is the same view which shows the progress of other operations, such as rendering tasks. Here we can see the copying operation progressing. The area above the operations section allows you to save shortcuts for copy destinations which are used often. For example, if I know I'm going to copy to this folder a lot, then I can drag it into this area. This will make it easier to copy there in the future, and I can also access it when Flux Manage is in its single panel mode. Okay, the copy operation is now complete, and I can remove it from this list by clicking on it. Note that if an operation is still in progress, removing it from this list will not cancel the operation. It'll still continue in the background, and you can check its progress at any time by clicking on the Queue Monitor button at the top of the screen. As well as copying files, Flux Manage also has the ability to delete them. If I wanted to now delete the original files that I just copied in their original location, I can simply drag them to the Erase from Disk tile, which appears at the bottom of the screen. We've made this tile smaller than the others to make it difficult to drop things on there by accident, but you'll always get a warning message asking if you really want to delete the sequences, as this operation cannot be undone. The other option here is to convert the source files to an image sequence by dropping on the Convert tile. This gives you the same options as copying files, but it'll convert them to an image sequence such as DPX or EXR at the same time. You can generate image sequences in any of the formats supported by the Baselight renderer. Check out the Baselight user reference guide for more details. Okay, the final thing I wanted to show you was how to use Flux Manage to select sequences from an existing job or scene rather than a location on disk. To do this, I need to open the Job Manager, so I've set up another workspace which includes the Flux Manage and Job Manager views. Now I can simply drag a scene or even a whole job from the Job Manager into the Flux Manage view. And notice that I get the same options as when I drag a tile containing sequences from within Flux Manage. This enables me to copy all the footage used in a scene or a whole job to another location, for example. The destination folder here is the one currently selected in the Browser tab. I could also copy to another folder, or to one of my copy destinations. However, in this case, I want to use it as the source for a filter, so I'll drag the job onto the View or Filter tile. This has now created a new filter page containing all the sequences in the scenes in this job. I can now use this as the starting point for other filtering operations. For example, like before, I can use the Metadata Pivot to select shots which have a specific encoding. In this case, I'll select ProRes 422 Proxy. I can now combine this with other filter criteria, such as sequence length. And then I can sort the results by timecode. I can add additional source folders as before, or additional jobs or scenes to this filter. Note that the place where I drop the tile will affect the results I get. For example, if I drag the sources scene from the new showreel job into this area of the filter, it will add all the shots in this scene to the results of the filter. Whereas if I drop it at the top, here, it will add them before the filter, so the filter will be applied to these shots as well. So the results of my filter are now showing just the ProRes proxy sequences, which are over 100 frames long, in the showreel's job and the new showreel sources scene. As you can see, I was able to build up a very specific filter with just a few drag and drop operations. And I can continue to add to the sources and modify the filter to get exactly the sequences that I need. In fact, the drag and drop features of Flux Manage allow you to quickly select pretty much any required combination of media, which you can then add to your timeline, copy to a specific location, convert to an image sequence, or delete from disk.